Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the broadcast this evening. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator.
How are we today, sir? How is Nigeria today, sir?
Well, I mean, Nigeria is fine. Weather fine. I'm more frightened by what is happening in your neck of the woods in Europe than what is happening in Nigeria or in Africa.
But you know, sir, this is the time of the year where I say no one can oppress us from any other country because of the good weather.
Well, I wish you people would behave yourselves and then let the rest of the world be at.
Let me pick up from there because 2 points actually, sir, that I want to bring up. Number one is the Russia issue, Russia-Ukraine war. The escalations continue. The rhetoric is getting more and more tense over time. But some have also said that a lot of Africans should focus on Africa and not on what is happening in Russia because it doesn't concern the people in Africa. So let us start, sir, with some of these new developments and the new rhetoric that we're seeing coming out of Russia. If you want to share your perspective and then help us deal with the second part of the question, sir.
Well, both are linked, actually. I don't think you can separate them because the war is going to exacerbate the famine that is already taking place in Africa. There's going to be shortage of food, shortage of wheat. There's going to be shortage of oil. And even when it is available, the price is going to distort the gross national product of a lot of African countries. So there is no separation of there. But let me start with what frightens me. And then maybe we will then gradually slide on to the normal parts. 2 years ago, the president of the United States at that time, Trump, said if the rest of the world only knew the doomsday weapon that the United States has just developed, nobody will fool around with the United States. Now, the intelligence and military community in the United States said, shh, it's secret, it's a super secret development. He shouldn't have said that. But of course, I mean, he was the president of the United States, so he could get away, with saying anything. It was just like when Jimmy Carter revealed that America has this stealth bomber, which again was a super secret weapon at that time. 2 weeks ago, the same Trump said, why is America frightened of Russia? They should let Russia know what the secret weapon the US us. And that got me thinking. I had to sit straight up. Number one, why did the media not pick this up 2 years ago and 2 weeks ago? Why did the Biden administration not deny that there is a super doomsday weapon? I don't expect them to confirm it, but they could deny it if they really don't have it. Through normal back channels, have the Russians been told where that red line is, where if it is crossed, that will activate the deployment of that secret weapon? Does Putin know this? And that's why I said, now I am really frightened, because if Putin knows this, does this explain why he himself is now saying we have weapons that can reach anywhere in the world and we will be prepared to deploy? The Russian troops have been given the go-ahead to stand by and use any weapons at their disposal. Now, is this a game of brinkmanship, or what, in terms of games theory, we used to call a game of chicken? Who is going to, the two chickens are approaching each other, who is going to back off first? But with the game of chicken or the game of brinkmanship, there is always the danger of miscalculation. And that is why I said, really, you asked me this same question twice now, on two different occasions. Do I think we are already in a third world war? And I said, we are in Second World War plus. So let me now say, I believe we are in Second World War plus. And I think by the time I add another extra plus, I hope we don't have a hot global war on our hand. Right now, it's a European war. See, let us pay attention to the evidence that is out there. Look at the way the British government has itself cranked up its public pronouncement in the past 1 week. Now you have, on the authority of the British Defense Secretary, Britain saying planes should now be given to the Ukrainian government, and that weapons that Britain is making available to Ukraine is at liberty to use them to hit Soviet territory. The Germans have also now ante their own contribution by actually now they've moved from defensive weapons to offensive weapons. So when you put all of this together, is Britain been preparing itself for actually a world war? Because Russia has said it will be prepared to hit Britain if British weapons are used to hit Russia. So we should pay more attention to what leaders are saying. we should. They are open. I mean, this is not. They are not playing these war games secretly now. They are playing them out there in the open, and you kind of wonder whether they're not playing, whether they're not trying to frighten the other side, but that they're really trying to tell the other side they are ready to play the whole game, go the whole hog. So I would advise us to pay more attention now to what the leaders are saying. We of course, the latest development is the visit by the Secretary General. And I think that personally, I think the timing was wrong. I think the timing was wrong. Both sides were rude to the Secretary General, and I cannot remember for the life of me any time in world history when a Secretary General of the United Nations has been treated so shabbily. I can't remember. I know that he was forced into making this trip by that letter written by, is it 105 or 109? I don't remember now. Former senior officers of the United Nations who are retired now and have gone on to other things. But then all of these officers come from the global north. And I sort of wonder why. This was a precipitate visit. The timing was wrong. The conditions were not right. Usually, and I'm repeating myself now because you have asked me, or somebody asked this question on YouTube at one time, why is the UN silent? And I've said, usually the UN steps in when there are winks and nods that both sides are ready for a ceasefire and for a United Nations modulated peacekeeping mechanism to be put in place. Well, whatever you can say about these two, Russia and Ukraine, they are not ready for a ceasefire. They are not ready for any peacekeeping operation, any peacekeeping medium to be deployed. So why push the Secretary General into it? Is this simply to add to the sins of Russia? You know, you put another tick there, disgraced the Secretary General. See, the UN even tried to moderate. The Russians refused. So you add that to the sins of Russia. Was that what motivated this 109 former United Nations officials to write that letter that drove the Secretary General into making this precipitate visit? What did he get out of it? As I said, neither side was ready for ceasefire or concessions on any grounds. So he now limited himself to the humanitarian procedure to extract the civilians trapped in that factory, that steel factory. That is really now all he concentrated upon. Well, I will ask myself, what do you have the Undersecretary General for humanitarian affairs for? What do you have the Director General of the International Committee of the Red Cross for? These are things, these are mechanical things that they could handle. It shouldn't have taken the trip by, it shouldn't have taken the insertion of the Secretary General. So the Secretary General is your last weapon of peace. Is there. When I used to teach in the university, I used to tell my students that when you have fighting, between between two sections of the family, you introduce that old great-grand auntie who is still alive. You introduce her at the time when you are sure both sides will say, Mama, if not for you, what I would have done in this place. But by that time, both sides were ready for her to intervene, but not when blows are still flying and one blow at the great-grand auntie and she falls down. Now you now have murder charges on your hands. So I don't think the Secretary General should have gone at this time. He was insulted by both sides.
Sir, let me pick one point there before we talk about the Africa part of the question regarding the Secretary General. What is your view on the thought that the UN might be a little bit more conservative in its approach compared to what it was like under other leadership or under other secretary generals? So this response of the United Nations to this issue, is this a function of the Secretary General we have there, or is there a wider perspective that we could be looking at?
No. The United Nations is a conservative organization. It's a unique organization that is dependent on support from not just all member nations, especially members of the Security Council, which are the veto-wielding 5 nations: the United States, Russia, China, France, and who else? Who else? There is Britain. Now, each one of these, because it holds the veto power, could disrupt anything that the UN wants to do if it's opposed to it. And when actually one of them is either Russia or the United States, there's nothing that the UN can do except to make a fool of itself. And that's actually why those people wield because those are the nuclear powers. And the UN cannot fight a nuclear power on its own. In any case, how many divisions does the UN have? 0, zilch, nothing. It depends on contribution of troops from its member states when peacekeeping operations or peace enforcement operations are called for. And no member nation of the United Nations is going to contribute troops to go and fight American troops. No. But when the operation is supported by especially these 5 veto-wielding powers, then the UN is at its best. That blue flag then commands, respect, commands authority. But without those 5 nations supporting it, and let us get this clear, because I'm always saying this, that we should regard our platform as the voice of the global South. Did the UN, even though it was opposed to American and British invasion of Iraq, did it do anything to stop it? No, it couldn't. And even though I have said that the Secretary General was shabbily treated, the Americans treated Brutus Ghali just as shabbily when he tried to be an activist Secretary General. Was treated just as shabbily. I'm sure if the shoes were on the other foot and the Secretary General says it was going to intervene when America was involved, they probably would not even allow him into the White House. They may just stop his visit at the level of the Secretary of State. So the US itself has treated in the past secretaries general that he didn't like, is treated them shabbily as well. You have to understand that the Secretary General is a servant of the United Nations. He's a servant of all of us. He gets his authority from the pooled authorities of all the member states of the UN. When that pool is not there, frankly, the man is stripped naked.
Yes, sir. Someone here is agreeing with you. They said the visit came too late and achieved too little. And there's another question here, sir. This person is saying, if this is beginning to threaten to be a global action, can Africa really now afford to continue to fold its arms? Shouldn't the AU now begin to put its perspectives out?
Funnily enough, about 3 hours ago, I got a call from some of the people who are worried about what was going on, asking me a form of this question. Diplomatic intervention can be activated at different levels. One level is the one the questioner has asked in terms of the African Union. But the other level is the intervention by what I will call regional powers that does not seek to invoke the ponderous authority of working through regional organizations. To me, if you ask me to sketch out a scheme, I will say the foreign minister of India, or the prime minister of India, or it may not even be India, could be the prime minister of the president of Brazil, could pick up the phone and say to the president of Nigeria, president of South Africa, President of Chile, and say, is it possible for us to meet, or could our foreign ministers meet and see whether there is anything we can do? And he could say, I'm thinking of, a joint appeal to the Pope, or a joint appeal to the, or a visit by our 4 or 5 foreign ministers to both Moscow and Ukraine. Because they say one of the things that worked against the Secretary General was that the UN itself had taken a position, and the Secretary General clearly and forcefully articulated this position of the UN that the invasion of Ukraine is an act of aggression, is a violation of the sovereignty of Ukraine and the Charter of the UN. So the UN itself had almost become, if you like, a party to the dispute. And it is the nature of this particular dispute that perhaps that was inevitable. But if you now have, which it should be possible, people that Russia respects and that Ukraine respects, and that have not been active participants in the combat that is going on. Who knows? But of course, like I said about the Secretary General of the UN, the timing will have to be right. What you are taking there, because don't forget, Turkey has tried to mediate. It didn't work. So the timing has to be right. The package that you are taking to both sides. And I think that time will come when Russia becomes afraid of that doomsday weapon by the United States, and the United States itself comes to a conclusion that it needs to be cautious about how it reacts to Putin. At that point, both sides may now be looking for save face mechanism. And that would be the right time. But I would have thought that because what has happened, and you and I have talked about this, honestly, the world order has been unscrambled. Sweden, that used to be a safe pair of hands in terms of peacekeeping operations under the UN flag, now says is going to join NATO. Switzerland, the godmother of all neutrality, itself is now imposing sanctions against Russia because it now believes that Europe is at stake. Finland, which also used to be a safe pair of hands in terms of peacekeeping operations, is now claiming it wants to join NATO. Australia and New Zealand, who also used to be safe pair of hands when it comes to peacekeeping, UN peacekeeping operations, are now practically extensions of NATO in Southeast Asia. So really, it's South America and Africa that, to me, are now hanging in the balance, and perhaps the fate of the world probably is going to depend on what these two continents, can they find the leadership and the wisdom within these two continents to save the world? I don't know. But I don't think folding of hands by Africa and South America is in their own interest and in the interest of the world, for that matter.
Can you hear me, sir?
Now I can hear you.
Oh, sorry.
Before I couldn't.
Sorry. My question is, let us look at this arrangement between Sweden and Finland about joining NATO. How significant is that in triggering other countries in that region to start to come together against Russia? And is that going to stop Russia at all?
I'm not sure whether the motivation by Sweden and Finland, whether the motivation is to stop Russia. I think they're just frightened. It's become existential issues for them. And for really all these other countries in Europe that are not members of NATO, they are looking now for an umbrella, a security umbrella that they can find safety in, because Russia has now become unpredictable. You've had the general, one Russian general talking about Moldova, and there are now bombing incidents in the Russian section of Moldova. You see, in a way, the dissolution of the Soviet bloc has left unsolved problems now facing us, because there are Russian minorities all around that area in countries that were former members of the Soviet bloc, but that are now independent. It's like what we have in Africa, where people sat down in Berlin, if you recall, took a pencil and decided, well, France, you say you are interested in this area, but Britain also says it's interested in the same area. Okay, we will draw a line here. You take the West and you take the East, irrespective of the people living there. And so all over Africa, you have split nationalities. Split nationalities. Fulanis are everywhere. Hausas are everywhere. They're in Nigeria, they're in Niger, they're in Mali. Kanuris are in Nigeria, they're also in Chad. Yorubas are in Nigeria, 40 million, but they're also in Benin Republic. If you go to Cameroon, you have the Nigerian-Cameroonian boundary, again, bifurcating nationalities. So what has happened in Africa is also what the dissolution of the Soviet bloc now created in Europe. In Africa, we were wise enough wise enough that at independence, we say, all right, we recognize that all these boundaries are artificial. We have two choices. Either we now start wars of unification of nationalities, so that we will be moving boundaries here, moving it there, and we will be fighting boundary wars, probably in 50 countries all over Africa. Or we will take the least best option, accept the boundaries as they are, but then have this super organization, first of all called the OAU, and now the African Union, where we'll then try to determine on a continental basis the fate, the development, and what have you, of all of us. Europe lacked that kind of approach. The EU tried to address that issue by forming the European Union. Of course, now Britain has left, and it didn't cover the whole of Europe. It covered Western Europe. The Eastern Bloc was still there, not covered by the European Union. So they are now dealing, unfortunately, in series of wars of aggression, whether in Georgia, in Moldova, in Ukraine. They are now dealing with this. This is their own wars of trying to redrawing the boundaries that they inherited at independence.
So do you think that, because you're talking about this, how Africa handled that demarcation of the time, do you think this war could force some kind of unification of some of these countries to be different blocks, like NATO, like the EU? And from an African perspective, would it force deeper unification of African countries at all?
Well, I think that if we put on our thinking caps, and if we have the type of Nkrumah, Sekou Thomas Sankara, Rawlings, if we have that kind of leadership now, who will see the dangers which Europe is going through as something that is possible in Africa, if Africa then does not speed up what Gaddafi wanted and Nkrumah wanted, more structural African unity, so that these artificial boundaries will not become irritants, because that's really what can lead to, there have been boundary skirmishes. I was involved in, trying to mediate the war between Burkina Faso and Mali, dealing with their, boundary issues. When I was a foreign minister, and we got the two sides to agree, but there are still, even Libya at that time was also laying claim to parts of northern Mali. So it's still all there. Even between Algeria and Morocco, it is still all there. And this is the time when we need the Nkrumahs of Africa, Thomas Sankara, Secretary Jerry Rawlings. This is the time we need them to actually provide push for the African Union to take advantage of the lessons that one will learn from Europe. That's number one. Two, take advantage of the fact that Europe now has existential problems on its hand. Therefore, it doesn't have the time to interfere in Africa, not now. Take advantage of that so that the changes in Africa will be along desired lines without interference, especially by France.
Thank you for that, sir. I think someone here is thanking you for the analysis on Latin America and the possible actions they can take to bring a ceasefire. Sir, let's talk about one point. Actually, let me do France first, and then I come back to Africa. And yet again, your prediction came true in the sense that you felt that Macron was going to win a second term. What do you think that second term is going to be like for him, sir, given some of the challenges that we have with the EU, and also what is happening with the withdrawal from Mali? And a potential, maybe it's the beginning of a withdrawal from Africa of French, and maybe the diminishing of French influence in Africa. What direction do you think Macron may want to go in his second term?
Well, before I address the issue you've raised, if my memory serves me right, I thought we had a bet on who will win. So I will be expecting my bottle of champagne. I would, because my prediction won. You can't argue with an old man.
No, you read the small print, sir. The small print was that if you are right, I get the bottle of champagne. If I'm right, I get the bottle of champagne. It's in the small print, sir. I'm in the UK.
All right. Okay. Now, congratulations to Macron. I think it's a massive victory. That night, as the results were coming in, I didn't know whether I was hearing the same results as the media. They were talking about, oh, he escaped by the whiskers, of his teeth. This is so close. We really can't. A man won by 58% to 42%, and you are. But I think, you see, the journalists had made up their mind that this was going to be a close result, and they didn't know how to handle the massive result that it was. They even didn't want to give Macron the credit that he deserved. Well, by the following day, I think emotions had calmed down and you were starting to get more balanced analysis by the European media. The one that concerns me right now is the absence of any debate on Africa by Macron and Madame Le Pen. It was as if it didn't matter. And yet we still have these French policies towards Africa that smack of neo-colonialism. I have talked on this platform about the colonial pact. In case somebody wants to say, come on, the French have left. Well, what are you still talking about? And actually, I've heard people say that, but they're not paying attention to details. Yes, the French have left 60 years ago, but the colonial pact is still there. And let me remind our listeners of the essence of the colonial pact. Number one, any contract in any French-speaking country must first be offered to a French company. It's if you cannot find any French company that you can then offer it to any company from another country. And the reason why the French turned against President, the last president of Cote d'Ivoire before Ouattara, was because he wanted to give to Germany the building of a bridge in Cote d'Ivoire. And I'm talking about 5 years ago. I'm not talking about 20 years ago. And the French troops went and grabbed him. They came up with these spurious charges of genocide and violation of human rights, bundled him before the International Criminal Court, that then found the man not guilty. That all this were just charges, spruced up by the French to get him out of the way, all because he broke that first article of the colonial pact by offering the building of a bridge to a German company rather than a French company. Number two, all export earnings by each African country, French African country, must be domiciled in French Central Bank. You will have access to only 25% of it for your own development, while the French will use it to build up their own economy. If you tell the French you need more of your own money, they will lend it to you at commercial rate. That is in the colonial pact. Number three, all your officers must be trained in French military establishments. So there was no debate in France about this is the time to end this colonial pact. There was none. So really, yes, I congratulate Macron. It means well for European unity because it's a European, he believes in European unity, and therefore his election will further strengthen the drive for European unity. It will help fill that gap left by the retirement of the German or the former German chancellor, rather than if it had been Le Pen. It will strengthen NATO. I know that when Macron first came in, he was talking about Europe building its own armed forces to compete with NATO, but haven't seen what is going on between Russia and Ukraine. I think even Macron himself would think that's a pipe dream. He will be in there in NATO to strengthen it. Domestically, however, he is likely to have problems. Every European country has this, what I call post-COVID-19 problems in terms of how to grow the economy. All their economies are in recession. And he has this problem on his hand of early retirement by French workers. He wants to raise the age of retirement because the more young people retire, the more a drain on the pension fund is. Whereas if you can raise the age of retirement, then you slow down the drawdown from the pension fund. Of course, the French don't want to hear any of this. You cannot touch their pension fund. It's anathema. It's haram. You cannot raise pension age, retirement age. It's an abomination. They don't want to hear any of it. Those problems are still there. And then how do you grow the economy when there's a war going on, next door to you? How do you grow the economy in order to cut down the unemployment rate in France? Those are the domestic problems that is going to be faced with. And his opponents, Madame Le Pen, and that other guy who is on his left, have all served notice to him that the election to the National Assembly, their French Parliament, I think in June, is going to be a contest again that is going to be fought with all passion that went into the last presidential campaign.
So let us end with another question on Africa, sir. But there's a question here on YouTube that I will put to you before I ask that. This person says, if all Francophone countries come together, are you saying they cannot break up the unjust pact?
They cannot, because there are French military bases in Africa. And if push comes to shove, French troops will be used. They're already there. Not that they'll be flown in from Paris to overthrow these African leaders. Don't forget that the first coup in independent African countries was orchestrated by the French in Togo in 1963, I believe. And that led to the assassination of Sylvanus Olympio, who was the president of Togo, all because he wanted to change the currency so that the Togolese will have their own currency. They wouldn't have to use the CFR, which the French had ordered all its French territories to use. And they replaced them now with Yadema, who was a sergeant in the French armed forces before they were repatriated into separate African countries. So they wouldn't even dare, because they know what has happened. The French still control all these Francophone African countries, whether it's Cameroon, whether it's Benin Republic, whether it's Senegal, they still control them. Mali, Chad.
Thank you, sir. Let's talk. I was going to go to Chad, and you mentioned Chad there already. And this is the challenge they have around organizing a national dialogue. And this is obviously following the death of the president. His son took over. And now they're trying to bring all the groups together, have this national dialogue. But some of the rebel groups are putting some preconditions on the table. So from your experience of being part of a national conference, how should Chad be navigating this challenge that they have, given, of course, they have a younger president or leader of this transitional government?
Since independence, Chad has known no peace. I've stopped counting how many times Nigeria tried to host peace conferences to try to unite all Chadian factions so that they could resolve their problems around conference table. It's proved impossible. Now, if you say they want to borrow a leaf from what we did in Nigeria in terms of the National Conference of 2014, they are going to, the different factions must have free hands. They must not be teleguided. Because even though France is still busy in Europe, there are still French agents in Chad. Chad still has quite a heavy presence of jihadists, in addition to the traditional divisions amongst them. And these are people who are used to resolving conflicts through the battlefield, even if it means that, okay, their man will get to the presidential palace and be there for 3 years before another problem starts and is replaced. They just use the presidential palace almost like a revolving door. You are defeated, you go back to the hills and you start fighting again. I don't hold that much hope that they can replicate in Chad what we did in Nigeria. I don't think so. I just think the divisions are too deep-rooted, one. Number two, there are too many external factors, intervening and playing the Chadians like you are playing fiddles, so that they don't even know what their interests are, except get their man into the presidential palace. I don't hold that much hope.
Thank you very much for this evening, sir. I will not take you over time today. We are bang on time, but thank you very much for the contributions. We will be back again to our viewers next week, same time, 7 p.m. UK and Nigeria and other countries will take your times from there. Thank you very much for the comments online here. And please do remember as we close that send your questions in. I have put the prof on the spot. He answers almost every question you put to him. Thank you very much, sir. And good night, sir. Good night to our viewers.